If you've spent any time in biohacking or longevity circles recently, you've probably heard the word peptides. But what are they? Does the science back up the hype? What should you know before exploring them yourself? Today, my guest is Dr. Jeff Gross. He's one of the leading voices in regenerative and cellular medicine. Today is going to help us separate what's established from what's experimental and why this field may represent one of the most significant shifts in how we think about healing and aging. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty Podcast Network. Great to have you with me, as always. And I have a really interesting guest lined up that I will introduce in a moment. And we're going to be talking about health and some new ways to take care of yourself, which does tie in with our sponsor for today's show, Jason Gagne, and his Good to Go body workout program. Jason's program, is different than other people's workout program. Jason was on the show about a month ago, and he went into detail explaining his philosophy of starting a workout program from the ground up, literally starting on the floor with your flexibility and building that foundation so you don't get hurt when you try more complex movements and you start mixing in more intense workouts, which is what a lot of workout plans don't do, which is why a lot of people end up quitting their workout plan. So you can save $100 off of Jason's Good to Go body workout program by just using the link, either if you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app. Just go to that description, grab that link, save $100, and check it out. All right, let's get started with today's episode and bring in my guest for today, and that is Dr. Jeff Gross. He is a board certified neurological surgeon and founder of Recelebrate, a regenerative medicine practice focused on anti-aging and cellular therapies. He's a UC Berkeley biochemistry graduate and George Washington University MD. Dr. Gross has transitioned from traditional neurosurgery into the emerging frontier of therapeutic peptides, longevity science, and biohacking with a philosophy that puts surgery as a last and cellular medicine first. Dr. Gross, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to this conversation today. And it's interesting to me. It's always interesting to me when somebody with your background as a surgeon is advocating for treatment that does not involve surgery. That always kind of piques my interest, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to speak with you today. And as we talked about pre-show, my knowledge on peptides is pretty minimal. My audience, I'm going to assume, I'm sure there's some that are maybe ahead of me a little bit, but most are probably in that same boat that we're in the learning phase. So looking at this as an opportunity to get educated, learn the basics, and start to build from there. But to start out, I think a good question. You have a medical background, a surgery background. What started pulling you toward regenerative medicine and away from traditional surgery?
Logic pulled me. I had never been very surgically aggressive in my practice, always looking for options to try to make surgery the last thing we did and all other treatments. But there was a large gap between traditional treatments and, surgery. And patients were often in that gap where things weren't working. The medicines weren't working. Maybe some injections for pain weren't working, but they weren't quite ready for surgery. And they would ask, how about this? How about stem cells? How about these things? And I watched professional athletes, 20 years ago leave the country to go get treatments.
Mhm.
And I said, I need to add that tool. There's something about that. So I went back and retrained and relearned and stopped going to the traditional, neurosurgery conferences where you hear the same thing over and over and over again. So I started adding regenerative medicine, stem cells, exosomes, things like that, which is really in the whole realm of what we call cell signaling, where we're encouraging ourselves to behave in a more restorative, youthful setting like they
Mhm.
used to. And that peptides, growth factors, proteins is part of that. It's not really new. It's part of that. And the peptide resurgence has been really big in the last few years. So I do that whole realm, and that's what pulled me there. My patients pulled me there, and now we have these newer tools. In fact, it's all I'm doing now is some type of coaching or treatment involving these newer tools.
Okay. So it sounds like your thinking was always, I guess, towards surgery as a last resort. But was there something that happened that you can point to that kind of shifted your thinking, like as you talked about, to really start looking into adding these regenerative treatments?
No, it was an ongoing idea in the back of my head that grew and grew, and then it became more popular. And I grew sick of the status quo, the sick care
Mm.
system. That wasn't a single event. It's always been there. And I just said, I'm contributing to the problem if I'm still practicing in it. So I had to extricate myself, put down the Kool Aid, and go learn something that's out there, but you really have to jump over and learn about it.
Yeah. So what was that learning process like? You're practicing medicine. I'm sure very busy in that regard, and then going and learning, really a new, not a new field, but a different
Correct.
approach.
Well, I mean, it was chance favors the prepared mind. And, I have that undergraduate background in biochemistry, which really encompasses cell biology. And, you go into medical school and then training and the practice, you're really not using that as much at the cellular level, the root cause level. So it was nice. It was like interesting again to get back into that. So the
Mhm.
education was eye opening as how much had happened in the years since I had studied it last, and so much good science and medical evidence behind it, mostly from Europe and Asia because they're 2 decades ahead
Ah.
compared to the US. The US is suppressed by those who benefit from suppressing stem cells and peptides. And I think we all know there are large pharmaceutical companies behind that. There are large implant companies behind that. They have big lobbies that drives, government decision making, and that, you know, gets its way into what health insurance covers. And there's this medical industrial complex of doing things that aren't the latest and greatest for Americans.
Yeah, it is interesting, and, you mentioned earlier about athletes that you were treating going to foreign countries to get treatment, and, a lot of people kind of had to have this, like, it's like a wiring in their brain. They're like, "Well, why would anyone do that? We have the best healthcare in the world here in the United States."
Well,
And
we used
in
to.
in many
We
we used to. So what changed? Was there something that changed where we went off track, or is it just the influence of these of the pharmaceutical companies and the marriage between them and the government?
Well, I think the biggest thing in the mid '80s was there was some change in healthcare law that allowed health insurance companies to become profitable. There used to be a limit as to how much they could profit, like a public utility.
Mm.
And now you have health insurance companies that have worked their way up to like United Healthcare that pays out. Sorry, let me rephrase. That takes in more in a day than they pay out in a year. So they're making at least 365x their money
Mhm.
on premium income compared to what they pay out. So there's a huge conflict of interest out there, and I've always seen that. I've always tried to work around that to the best I can, and they create this adversarial situation where a patient wants care. The doctor has to hire extra people to get authorization for the care that's denied by hassle factor. And they bog down doctors' offices with this nonsense because then they got doctors on the phone trying to get things approved and wasting their time so they can see fewer patients. The whole system is mired in this profit seeking health insurance companies. They only cover what they can make money on. They make a
Mhm.
mint on meds and things like that. So it's just the whole system is not patient friendly. And I was getting less and less enamored with the ability to carry out my Hippocratic duties in that system. So I had to extricate myself.
Yeah. And you've done that by, starting Recelebrate, right? So you tell us about sort of the process behind that and what you're offering with Recelebrate?
Sure. So I meant, I'm a spine surgeon, neurosurgeon, and I meant to add, regenerative medicine as a tool to offer spine patients short of surgery. But it's blossomed and now into everything I do. So we changed the practice to Recelebrate because we're celebrating the renewal of our cells through different
Mm,
means. And those means might be lifestyle, might be supplements, might be nutritional changes, might be exercise, might be how you sleep, might be hormesis, which is a slight stress on the body to build resilience and adaptability. Those things might be fasting, hot
mm,
sauna, cold plunge, high intensity exercise, things like that. And all those foster, suppressing inflammatory pathways in cells. And when you suppress inflammatory pathways, you foster slower aging. So people come to me for longevity advice. And I love to work with them one on one on that. And everyone's different. And that allowed me to say, well, we also have, the beauty of stem cells, and stem cells secrete something that actually does the work called exosomes and growth factors. Those growth factors are proteins, and the smallest proteins we call peptides. So that's what we do here at Recelebrate.
okay. And I should have noticed this before, but I just noticed next to your name on the screen, it says Stem Cell Whisperer. So we're gonna get to that in a minute, where that comes from.
Yeah.
But before we do, you talked about peptides and, peptides they're everywhere right now. So what exactly is a peptide?
So a peptide is a small protein string. Proteins are molecules that run our body. Most of what we're made up is proteins, and proteins do the functions of the body. They are the enzymes that they are the receptors. They are antibodies. They are within the cells. They're involved in the surface of the cells. They're involved in all the pathways of the cells. Um, they involve oxygen carrying. Hemoglobin
Mhm.
is a protein, and peptides are just smaller fragments. All peptides and their larger brethren proteins are made up of strung together in certain orders of building blocks called amino acids. And those amino acids are molecules we make, some of them we have to eat. Those are called the essential amino acids. And they have nitrogen atom at the core of the molecule. So that's the key element. And peptides are the smaller, more primitive fragments that have function in the body, and they're not new. Insulin is a peptide, for example. Some of the small hormones in our body, like oxytocin, is a peptide, which is also a neurotransmitter. So, so they're not new. What's new is being able to use them in a strategic way to get a desired benefit. That is kind of got this new resurgence.
Okay.
Plus, I think after COVID, people are a little sick and tired and not so trusting of things the government forces on them. The government, aka health insurers, which
Mhm.
really get a lot of direction from the government. So there's a democratization of health and wellness for people who have an appetite for it to hear about these peptides and maybe go try them. Um, so that is something, and I should also add the GLP-1 peptides, the weight loss peptides. like your Ozempic and your,
Mhm.
which is known as semaglutide and tirzepatide and retatrutide, have been so amazingly powerful and successful that really opened up the idea of peptides in general. Those are peptides.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting with COVID and everything that happened, and I have to be careful what I say because this will be on YouTube, but it did have, like you alluded to there, it did have the reaction with people that, the mantra at the time was "Trust the experts," and we saw how it played out. So a lot of people are like, "Wait a minute, I think we're trusting the wrong people here." So it's kind of opened a lot of people up to, like you said, they're looking for other solutions outside of the index card of allowable pharmaceutical opinions. But
That's right.
um, so you talked a little bit about misconception peptides. Uh, what are people, or are there, do you think, that people are getting wrong peptides? Are people using maybe peptides that haven't cleared hurdles for testing on humans and maybe have on animals?
Yes, I mean there's a broad range of peptides. Some of the peptides are approved medications for certain uses, and some aren't, but they may have efficacy that's been demonstrated in the lab or in animals,
Mhm.
and very little data. But there's an issue here, and I think we should. There are a couple elephants in the room I'd like to call out, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
let's call them out,
So,
please.
elephant one is that big pharma cannot patent a naturally occurring molecule in your body. Therefore, they're not going to put $50 million behind a large randomized placebo controlled study. So those studies don't exist and likely won't exist unless somebody puts big money
Mhm.
behind it.
And
So
that's the only way that you can get FDA approval, correct?
FDA approval is millions and millions of dollars. So it
Mhm.
requires a corporation, a big company to do it. Very, very few people individually or as a small group can go through that hurdle. It's just not
Mhm.
there. But we don't need FDA approval, and let's unpack that for a moment.
Yeah.
The FDA was set up by Congress to protect consumers, and they do that by monitoring and managing what are called marketing claims. The FDA does not approve the practice of medicine. And people don't understand that. And they throw around this phrase FDA approved. And a lot of people, even doctors who have consumed too much Kool-Aid, think that you can't do things that aren't FDA approved. That's ridiculous.
Mhm.
So when I talk about stem cells, when I talk about exosomes, when I talk about most peptides, even here on your show, but elsewhere, I'm not making any claims that we're curing or treating a disease or condition because none have been approved for said claims. They only monitor that because that's all they're allowed to monitor. That's what Congress set them up to do. So when we use that phrase FDA approved, we're often scaring people and it's a disservice. We should say something is FDA approved for marketing claims or not FDA approved for marketing claims. And sometimes those are called indications. So let me go a different direction with that. If you came to see me in my office, John, and we did some labs and found you to be vitamin D deficient,
Mhm.
I would probably recommend we replace your vitamin D with a supplement. And you'd say, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that, right? That's a
Yeah.
simple thing to do. Not FDA approved. If you showed up at the emergency room because you left the gym and you overexercised and you didn't hydrate, and they said, "Oh my gosh, you are dehydrated," what are they going to do for you, John? They're going to give you
Get you
IV
some
fluids,
fluids, yeah.
right? Not FDA approved. Most of what doctors do is not FDA approved.
That's
It's
really
just not.
interesting, yeah.
So let's remove that phrase as some type of hurdle that has to be crossed because it
Mhm.
absolutely doesn't. We don't follow that for good guidance. Hippocratic oath comes first. We have to help people, you know, and for their best interest. So therefore, I'm not worried that many peptides aren't approved by the FDA because I prescribe vitamins and supplements and other things that and medicines throughout my career and will
Mhm.
continue to do so that aren't approved for marketing claims. And if you use that phrase FDA approved, or you hear that phrase, make sure they follow it up with marketing claims. We have to fix that because it scares people when they don't, and a lot of doctors. And then these these things have biologic relevance. These peptides have biological relevance. They're naturally occurring for the most part. So if you're low on potassium, which is naturally occurring, you're going to take some potassium.
Mhm.
One of the reasons we use stem cells is because they decline with age, and we want to get a more youthful healing of something. We might use stem cells or stem cell exosomes because we're lower on them. We help replace naturally occurring. Same for peptides for the most part. It's naturally occurring. It's not like a drug
Right.
that's been synthetic. Although the patented peptides have been modified from their natural form, and those are patentable by big pharma.
Those are the ones like you were talking about earlier, the GLP-1s, the semaglutide, and yeah.
There are others, tesamorelin,
Mhm.
which we may talk about, and a few others. They slightly modify it, and those modifications are very basic. Maybe one amino acid is switched to improve how it binds or how long it lasts in the bloodstream or something like that.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, and, I'm glad you laid that out about FDA approval 'cause I work in the supplement space. I'm a brand ambassador for a supplement company, and I'm very familiar with, getting that pushback. "Well, is this approved
Yeah.
by the FDA?" Um, so
And by the way, if something's not approved, it doesn't have approval. It doesn't mean it's unapproved or disapproved or you can't do it.
Mhm.
And I'm sure if you work for a supplement manufacturer, on the bottle it says this has not been evaluated by the FDA.
Right,
So it's
right.
got a neutral stance.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's the same with most peptides. They're not bad necessarily. They haven't been called out as being
Mhm.
bad. They're just not yet approved for marketing claims. So we're not making any claims here. We're just here to educate, which, by the way, is the doctor's main duty with patients every day.
Yeah. Should be,
Right.
for sure, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about stem cells since you only get an opportunity every once in a while to talk to the stem cell whisperer. So I can't pass this up. But there's different types of stem cells, right? And there's
Yeah.
certain
Yeah.
things that are legal in the United States, certain things that aren't. So can you kind of give us like an overview of stem cells, what you are able to practice, or what you practice
Yeah.
at Recelebrate, and kind of what the whole space, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, we're not allowed to use what are called embryonic tissues. So anything that's from an aborted fetus is currently off limits. Other than that, we're back to that FDA approval
Mm.
item. So we can use properly supplied regenerative biologics like stem cells and things secreted by stem cells, which are growth factors and vesicles we call exosomes. And it turns out that stem cells really don't do work much. They supply these cell signaling factors, again, the growth factors, which are mostly proteins and peptides, and the vesicles, which are exosomes. So you can now skip the cells and go right to the actual particles supplied by the cells. There are different reasons you might do one or the other. And now we're getting more granular, the type of tissue we want to stimulate. And there's a new type of stem cell called the Muse stem cell, which is a very small subset of stem cell, which might be able to actually engraft into your body and then also secrete its own signaling. So that's new. We're just getting into that, and they seem to be more powerful in general. And most people who've had regular stem cells are probably getting a small percentage of those Muse cells anyway, which is doing the real work. So we can do things like that. I do a lot of joint and spine procedures, injections, helping people avoid surgery. Back to my thesis, right? That's what
Mhm.
we want to do. Helping to suppress inflammation. People with inflammatory problems, we help their body do the work. At the end of the day, their body does the work. We're just giving them the encouragement, the cellular encouragement that's been lost or harmed during the aging process or during a disease process. So that's what regenerative medicine does. It helps reset our cells back to a more youthful state. And these biologics are donated by C-section births because they're sterile.
Okay.
It's through the American Tissue Bank. it's a regulated method. It's true donation. They do not get paid. They're highly screened mothers. They're non-COVID vaccinated where I get them. And these are the same folks who get a kidney when it's time for a kidney transplant.
Mhm.
And then go on ice to a lab. And guess what? The labs are FDA registered. The- they're the highest quality labs. They're audited by the FDA, visited by the FDA, documentation, testing, sterility, everything's got to be dialed in. And then we buy them. I'm an end user. My clinic is an end user. So people think, oh, that's illegal in the US. And certainly if you own a clinic in Tijuana, that's what you want people in the US to think. But it's not illegal.
Mhm.
We do it. We do it every day. And even as a surgeon, we are using different types of regenerative particles and peptides to
Mhm.
do surgery. But now we use it to prevent surgery.
I'm just curious. This question will be specific, but I have an opportunity, so I'm going to ask it because I have people near and dear to me who suffer from Parkinson's, and I've recently been going down the rabbit hole looking for different treatments and things like that. And stem cells recently came up, and I was researching that. Um, is that something that you've seen or had experience in
Yep.
with
Yep.
treatment for Parkinson's with stem cells?
Absolutely. Yep. It's a not uncommon thing we address here in the clinic. Um, Typically, I utilize stem cell derived exosomes in a nasal spray. The brain gets better delivery from a nasal spray. Although we are looking at including Muse cells uh, uh, to see if we can get even a better response. But I've seen people with Parkinson's come into my office, do the nasal spray, and they change right in front of us. Their tremor
Really?
diminishes. If they have the slowness and the shuffling, they have more fluidity of movement, more facial expressions, the whole thing. So it's an amazing way to deliver a biologic, suppress the neuroinflammation component of what's going on in the brain, because a lot of problems have an inflammatory component. You might not always be addressing the underlying loss of dopaminergic cells, but you might be able to improve things and slow the need for meds and slow the development of the underlying process. Really, that's what we're trying to do.
Mhm. Because like Parkinson's and so many other diseases, the meds also have the side effects
Yep.
which cause
Yep.
a lot of the
Yep.
issues that come along with it. But
Yep. The non-natural drugs, and there's a role for them. I don't mean to come on here and
yeah,
say drugs
right,
are
right, yeah.
bad, but there are options that you might try before or in conjunction with as well. There are options, and again, doctor's job is to provide what's called informed consent. It's
Mhm.
a list of all the options, not just the ones on the menu for big pharma.
Okay. So, along those lines of talking about Parkinson's, what are some other, you know, treatments or things you've seen in your practice or elsewhere that you're really excited about, either in the peptide space or the stem cell space or something else?
Well, the low hanging fruit is musculoskeletal cartilage regeneration. We take people who have, loss of joint cartilage, like in a knee.
Mhm.
They have knee pain, swelling, reduced function, trouble walking. Um, they have what's some doctors would just call arthritis, but it's a degenerative process of the joint. It can even be as bad as the cartilage is gone, and some doctors just say, "Oh, it's bone on bone." They just look at an X-ray.
Mhm.
So we're very granular about that. We've been able to do an injection procedure that's a French protocol that's been around for 20 years. And that injection, usually within a year, in most people, has been able to help restore the thickness of the cartilage and with it, reduce the pain, move them away from the need for joint replacement. And we have MRIs before and after a year later showing that improvement. Now, I'm not allowed to make a claim that I can do that, but I can show
Mhm.
examples. I can show you the literature, the medical evidence, but the US FDA will not allow me to make that claim.
So even the French are ahead of us. Wow.
Way. I mean, we.
Wow, wow. Um, so for people who are listening to this and, they're curious, or maybe they're to the point where they're in pain, maybe they're suffering from that knee pain, that bone on bone pain,
Yeah.
and they wanna find someone like yourself. Maybe they're not, you're what state are you in again?
I'm in Nevada, but most of my patients are not.
Oh,
We
really?
do, yeah. We're not allowed to advertise. The FDA won't, because of their status, the Google and Facebook, Meta, they won't let us advertise regenerative medicine, stem cells, exosomes, or peptides. Right? They shut you down. You can't have ads.
Huh,
So that's why these international clinics do so well because they can freely advertise.
really?
There's no problem with those international clinics. I have colleagues in those clinics, and they do just fine. Um, I'm not here to say it don't, because if you want to go to Panama, great, you can get your stem cells on a vacation at the same time.
Yeah, well, you can take a vacation in Nevada too.
You
I
can
mean,
come to
it's
Las Vegas. We're happy to receive you here and get a nice meal, see a show while you're here in town.
exactly. There's plenty of ways to make a vacation out of a trip. So if people can't maybe they can't fly to Nevada and they're stuck somewhere on the East Coast for whatever reason, maybe they can't fly. What typical things or what safeguards should people look at when they're finding a clinic like yours that does what you do with regenerative medicine and stem cells and peptides? What types of markers should they look for in a clinic?
Well, you want to see someone that has some experience and training in the field. And most likely it's going to be a physician who was doing something else first and sort of found their way
Mhm.
into it, like me, because there aren't residencies right now for stem cell medicine or peptide medicine. You probably want to see results, befores and afters, examples, reviews, and you want to meet with the doctor and get second opinions. Maybe you'll find a personality that fits you better from one doctor compared to another. That goes for anything, not just this field.
Mhm.
And we're out there. I'm not the only one, right? There are plenty of us, and sometimes I help people find someone near them if they just aren't able to travel. But when I treat someone remotely, we do all the work at their local to them, if they need an MRI, if they need labs or whatever. And it's only when I think I can help them do we offer them to come visit us, and it's you only have to visit us
Yeah,
once for the injection, and then the recovery is at home, and I guide you remotely, just like we're doing here by the magic of video.
very cool.
I mean, this is not difficult. If COVID gave us one thing, it's telehealth is here to stay.
Yeah, that's the truth. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking of the remote aspect of it. So yeah, they can have all their lead up appointments just like this and come out for the treatment. That's very cool. So for people listening, who or they're serious about their longevity, um, maybe they're definitely open to regenerative care, or maybe they don't need it right now, but they're interested in other natural ways to kind of kick off that healing within their body. Like you talked about that cellular rejuvenation. You talked about some things like fasting, which I love. I love short fast. 1, 2, 3 day fasts for you can kick
Yeah,
in the autophagy. What
yeah.
what other types of things should people be looking at to kick off their cellular healing and just their body to sort of naturally regenerate?
Well, high intensity exercise in brief intervals. You know, resistance training, lifting heavy, not to hurt yourself, but you really have to strain your muscles and bones if you want to maintain your muscle mass and bone density, both of which
Mhm.
are associated with healthy longevity. Um, I love hot sauna. Cold plunge is another. It's not my favorite because it's so darn cold. I can tolerate the heat better, but those things, if done properly, um, do stimulate, like you said, autophagy, clear out the senescent cells, and mitophagy. So I'm getting more and more focused on mitochondria, cell within a cell these days. So whether it's peptides, and we were going to we thought we were going to talk about a lot of peptide stuff today. We sort of skirted around it, but there are
Yeah.
peptides to help restore mitochondria that I've become big fans of, and other things to stimulate mitochondrial function, like pulse electromagnetic field, red light, near infrared light therapies, things like that. In addition, are really great ways to stimulate cellular health. And if you stimulate cellular health, you stimulate your health. Got to
Mhm.
take care of the cells.
Well, let's talk about those mitochondrial peptides because that is interesting. So, yeah, what is out there, and what have you been using?
Well, I find people with weird issues. They find me, maybe I should say. They've seen 7 doctors, they've all these tests, they were told they have this problem or that problem or fibromyalgia or something, they just can't figure it out. They've got loss of energy, loss of, they got brain fog, they're not the same person. A lot of this is post-COVID or post-COVID vaccine as well. Maybe they have
Mm.
high spike proteins, which are known to damage the mitochondrial membrane. So our current protocol is to restore the mitochondrial health first by sealing the membrane in these leaky mitochondria, because the mitochondria are batteries. And if you can't separate the negative from the positive ends, the anode from the cathode, you're not going to have that differential in charge, which is what you're looking for.
Mhm.
So if you lick a 9-volt battery, it's because you got the charge just transferred from one end to the other. So the same thing is with your mitochondria. So we seal the battery with a peptide called SS-31, and that's about 1 month of that. And then we help do something to restore the internal functioning of the engine of the mitochondria. Cytochrome C oxidase. This is the stuff that helps the cell function, make energy, and also your main source of antioxidants. Otherwise, your cells get damaged and become zombie cells, senescent cells. So that one's called MOTS-C, and we'll do that for a month. And that's been a kind of a really cool reset on the mitochondria. Now, that assumes your labs are okay and we've got all the right vitamins and supplements, and because the mitochondria is very dependent on a lot of phytonutrients. It's very dependent on B vitamins, methylated B vitamins if you can't methylate yourself, all kinds of things.
That's it.
But that,
If someone has the MTHFR
yeah,
gene mutation, yeah.
yeah. The alternative, of course, is to get your B vitamins from nature, from citrus fruits and things, because nature methylates them. It's only the synthetic ones that you have to get methylated if you have that
Mhm.
gene issue. So
But but
we
but the FDA sprayed, what is it, in the 90s? They said that all of our grains have to be sprayed with folic acid, right?
same FDA that is now finding errors that they've made in the past. So
Mhm.
this is yeah, same group. So and by the way, the F in FDA stands for food. So they have been behind all the stuff in our food they're now deciding to remove, so that
Mhm.
Europe doesn't have and South America doesn't have, that kind of thing. So
Right, right.
um
I took you
but
off your topic, sorry there.
no, you didn't. It's part of the topic. Anyway, mitochondrial repair is a big area where we find some of these people with these odd syndromes just all of a sudden become themselves again. So, and it's because their batteries were uncharged, and there aren't good lab tests for that.
Mhm.
So there are some, but it's hard to figure out. Sometimes we try some. Those are peptides, and they're not approved for marketing claims. SS-31 does have an approval for an orphan syndrome, but we use it off label because it has a label. And
Mhm.
then the MOTS-C is a peptide that we release when we exercise. So it's almost like getting
Interesting.
some of the benefits of exercise without exercising. Now, that's not a replacement for exercise,
It's
people.
not
It's
a
not
magic
it's
not a
not going
magic exercise pill,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It is to the extent it helps your mitochondria and it helps you. I mean,
Mm.
we've all heard this. When you exercise, it reduces the risk of dementia. It improves other heart issues. One of the reasons is your muscles release this MOTS-C and other peptides that your body takes in. The humanin peptides and this and others. So the mitochondria are actually communicating with your whole body, and we're learning more and more about that.
Hmm.
We're late to the party there. Biology was so microscopic. Now it's nanoscopic.
Interesting. So I think two more questions here. We're running out of time. Curious what you would tell someone who wants to become a doctor today. Maybe there's a high school student listening or a younger kid, and they're thinking about they want to become a doctor. What kind of, or would you have any advice for them heading into that field?
Sure. If you're headed there and it's your calling and all that, you better have a big appetite for being overly controlled and it all being scripted and AI taking your job or a nurse taking your job, um, unless you're able to think independently and look at the realistic business side and biology side, or in this case, nanobiology side.
Hmm.
And what you learn in medical school is only the beginning. And seek new knowledge, different knowledge constantly. Renew yourself without going to the same status quo type of events.
Interesting. Um, Last question here. Where can my listeners find out more about Recelebrate? Where can they learn more about your work and connect with you?
Well, I'm no marketing genius, but when we came up with this name, Recelebrate, it wasn't a real word. So when we started putting it out there in social media and on the internet, we kind of cornered the internet with that word. So if you just search or Recelebrate, Recelllebrate, you can't help but find us.
Yeah, and I tested it out before the show, and it is the first thing that comes up. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe you are a marketing genius. I don't know.
I don't know, accidental.
Well, Jeff, this has been an enjoyable conversation. I really enjoyed, everything we talked about today. And pre-show we talked about getting deep into peptides, but as we talked, I kind of realized there was a lot more there that you have with your practice with Recelebrate, and I wanted to get a little bit into everything. So
No
thank you
worries.
for
Yeah,
sharing with us.
anytime. No, thank you. And if your audience got their appetite peaked and they're interested in peptides, I'll make myself available to you. You can bring me back and we can go deeper on that
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jeff, for coming on the show.
anytime. Take care.
All right, that is a wrap for today's episode of Finding Freedom. Thanks for listening today. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing on YouTube if you're watching there, or on Rumble, or on your favorite podcasting app. And if you really like this show and all the other shows we have here on the Lions of Liberty Network, please consider joining us on Patreon or Locals. With a little change in your pocket, you can get some bonus content, access to us, and also discounts on merchandise. And yeah, I'll be back next week with another great interview. In the meantime, keep moving.